Hi folks, it's Professor K and I am continuing along in our Introduction to Communication Theory, and we are talking today about chapter 19, which is another chapter in the publics section, which is tied very closely to rhetoric. We talked specifically about rhetoric in the previous section, and this chapter, chapter 19, is about dramatism and Kenneth Burke. And this chapter is oddly incredibly short, given the fact that Kenneth Burke and dramatism are huge theories. I mean, Burke's theory of dramatism, and Burke himself was hugely influential in the rhetorical tradition and changed the way people think about rhetoric and the purpose of rhetoric. Burke was the man. And a lot of people who are Burkean scholars, and there's actually an entire organization dedicated to Kenneth Burke, and a journal, the KBJ, the Kenneth Burke Journal. I mean, people are crazy about Burke and his theories. And this textbook doesn't even make a dent. But it does give you a nice little overview and simplifies it, because his theories were really complex, and they're still trying to be understood. I mean, he wrote legions about his ideas in rhetoric and language and drama. So dramatism specifically is the way of thinking about the world. The world is a stage. That's what it's a very famous saying, and Burke really thought that was true. That people, human beings, are almost function as actors. We've got different levels to us. So on one level, we are animals, right? So that's an assumption of dramatism. We do things based on instinct and animal behavior. We eat, we sleep, we need shelter, things like that. But then, moreover, we're connected to language and sort of the images that we have in our head of language. And that is a driving force. That's what Burke thought. It's a driving force in human behavior. And if you remember going back to chapter, I think 2, all the way in the beginning of the textbook, we talked about these different traditions. And the semiotic tradition is the idea that symbols are key to human behavior and communication, right? Because we're talking about communication. And Burke really, really loved him a good symbol. He was really into symbols. And so we are human beings and we do things because we have to eat. But if I said the word dinner to you, well, what is dinner? Is dinner a burger? Is dinner spaghetti? Is dinner fast food? Is dinner a power bar? Is dinner on the floor? Is dinner in a chair? Right? These are all the ways that we sort of think about this one symbol, the word dinner, because symbols are language. Language is like the most vital of the symbols. And so we all have our own reference. And that's with a ENTS. So the referent is the sort of the projected image that we put on the symbol. And then we think about the world based on these symbols. And so that's another aspect to dramatism, that language and symbols are he's critically important to the human system. So there are theorists that have extended Burke and coupled with Burke and said, it's not even just that language is important. We are nothing without language. I mean, human beings they stand out amongst the animals because we have the ability to understand and create and decode and code these symbols. And that was a big part of what Burke said, that even the symbols that we share, we often don't share them. And he had this phrase called terministic screens. And if you think about the looking glass or the goggles that we put on, these are basically the terministic screens. So they're these frames of reference for how we see the world. And they're deterministic. So like, this is it. This is the end all be all. I see the world a certain way because when you say dinner to me, I think of my dinner and my family's dinner. And when somebody else's dinner comes into the picture, I don't understand it. I mean, I get it, but here's an example. So my sister has 3 kids. They eat dinner at like 8 o'clock at night. This is, to me, bonkers. We eat dinner at 5:30 in my house. And I have 2 little kids, and they get hungry, so they need to eat at 5:30. But I also am hungry at 5:30. I want to eat dinner at 5:30. So when I call my sister at 8 o'clock at night, and she says, oh, we're just about to sit down to dinner, my deterministic screen is very different from her deterministic screen of what this concept, the symbol of dinner, a family time dinner to me is. It's 5:30, we all sit around, we eat dinner together. My sister's house, one kid's eating dinner at the desk, one kid's eating dinner in front of the TV, and their family dinner is very, very, very different. So think about that in terms of these references and these screens. And humans are choice makers is another thing that Burke said. And we make choices all the time, right? We make choices of how to think about the world, how to think about the interactions that we have. And we could endless amounts of choices that we make every day. And so Burke really thought that we're these actors on a stage, and the world's a stage, and we are making choices of how to interact with other people. We are making assumptions. We are making new symbols. We are constantly creating symbols and recreating symbols. And this led to some of his most famous works, which one of them was A Rhetoric of Motives, and he also wrote a book called Rhetoric. Rhetoric of Motives was his big work. And the other work he wrote was A Grammar of Motives, which is more about the language, and the rhetoric of motives is more about this idea of identification. And so that's not a part of what Aristotle talked about in rhetoric. He didn't really consider rhetoric to be a form of identification, although it is, and it was, even without Aristotle sort of defining this idea of identification, because language is a way that we identify with one another. And so that's what Burke really talked about when he talked about rhetoric, is that if I say dinner to you, and dinner to you is similar to my dinner, oh yeah, we eat dinner at like 5:36 in my house, and we all sit down too, and you and I share this, then what happens? We have identified with each other. Now that we have this shared symbol. And then what? We have some sort of bond. Even if you're a stranger and I don't know who you are and we're not going to be friends or whatever the case may be, we still have this shared symbol of here's what family dinner means. And if I say family dinner, now I can start to do other things with this, right? Family dinner, if we share, family dinner is 5:30, 6 o'clock, we all sit down together, we talk about our day, whatever it is. What can I do with that information? Well, a lot of it is about motivation. So think about this in terms of commercialization. Think about the commercials for family dinners. What are they? Are they at 8 o'clock and everyone's rushing around and one kid's sitting on the floor watching TV and one kid's up in his room doing his homework? No. When we see visions of family dinner on television, in commercials, in paintings, it's evening time, everyone's sitting down to dinner together. That's an ideal family dinner, right? That's something we should strive for. So now how do I use this in terms of motivation? Hey, everybody, why don't you buy this ketchup? Because if you have this ketchup, you're going to have this family dinner together. And now I'm persuading you that families who use this ketchup, well, they sit down to dinner together at 5:30, 6 o'clock, and it's a lovely, nice dinner, and they share their day, and that's what a family time is. So it's see how it just explodes, this idea? It's all connected to language and symbols. And so he had this big thing about identification and substance, which he defines as the general nature of something. Substance can be described in a person by listing demographic characteristics as well as background information and facts. So we all have substance to us. Do we share some of that substance? Do we not share some of that substance? And he said that's the sharing, right? That's how we identify, when we have this like sharing of substances together. And division is when we don't overlap. So my sister's 8 p.m. like all over the place dinner, and my 5:36 p.m. family time, sit down, talk about your day. We have a division there. We do not share that. Does that mean that we don't understand each other and we're very different people? No, we're related, right? I know her very well. But there's just this one thing that we don't share, so that we don't share that substance. And consubstantiation, when appeals are made to increase the overlap between people. So this consubstantiation is this idea that maybe I do watch a commercial on TV and I do see that family dinner is like this nice bonding moment where everybody sits around and is talking about their day, and I share that with my sister, and because that's my ideal, right? And that's my identification. And I tell her how nice this commercial was, or this TV show, and maybe I'm trying to find a way to get her into my family dinner time sort of mind frame, my screen, my deterministic screen of how I see the world. I want her in on that too, because I don't want to call her at 8 o'clock and she's sitting down to dinner. Because for me, 8 o'clock is time that I call my sister, because I have time, everybody's sort of playing or sort of winding down, right? So I'm trying to like have an overlap with her. I'm trying to increase this overlap. Consubstantiality, or issues of identification and substance, are related to the guilt redemption cycle, because guilt can be assuaged as a result of identification and division. What are you talking about? Okay, so if I call my sister at 8 o'clock and she says, we're just sitting down to dinner, I say, oh, you're just sitting down to dinner now? Oh, we ate dinner like 2 hours ago. Yeah, like we're all, relaxing now, and we're winding down. It's time for bed. Because I like my kids to eat early, because it's not good for you, is what I've read, to eat right before bedtime. What time do your kids go to bed? If you eat at 8 o'clock, oh, your kids going to bed at 10 o'clock? Oh, that's not, like, is that, I don't know. Yeah, of course, do whatever you want with your family. But do you see the guilt that I'm throwing out at my sister right now, right? She has no idea that I'm doing this. So this is part of this like identification, division. So we've got this division between dinner time and what dinner means, right? And I'm trying to get this back. I want her to get on my team about dinner time, because I want to talk to her on the phone. I don't want her to be sitting down eating dinner. I want to have a conversation with her. It's time to talk on the phone. So now I'm trying to guilt her into like, oh, you eat dinner at 8 o'clock. Eh? Well, that's sort of late, isn't it? Right? And there's my guilt coming out. Burke talked about the negative spaces. So when the negative comes into play is when people see their place in the social order and seek to reject it. So you talked a lot about these social hierarchies. So in terms of a social hierarchy, we often feel guilt as a result of our place in the hierarchy. So we can use my example in sort of a very like hypothetical hierarchy. Do I think I'm better than my sister because I eat dinner at 6 o'clock and she eats dinner at 8 o'clock? Do I think I'm a better parent? Maybe. I mean, I don't really think that, but I'm just using this as an example. So what's the hierarchy here? Maybe in terms of parenting, there's people who think that they're better as parents, and there's some sort of like, levels of good parent versus bad parent. So one of those things would be very negative, right? If I express this, that's a negative, and I'm trying to reject this social order. In terms of my sister is actually older than me. So there's that hierarchy, as well, right? So she should be a better parent than me. So maybe I'm trying to reject the social order of her being older than me, and I'm saying, well, I'm a better parent than you because I eat dinner at 6 o'clock. And now all of a sudden, we've lost a lot of this identification because of these hierarchies and because of this guilt that we're all throwing out on each other all the time. Moving on, because I'm sort of rambling, I want to talk lastly about the pentad. And the pentad is every scholar of rhetoric's favorite thing in the whole world because it can fit into anything. And if any of you are still thinking about how you might write a paper, or if you have papers in the future, scholars of communication love this pentad. The pentad basically says there's an act, right? So this is what is to be done by a person. Think about any communication situation you've been in. There is a scene, and this is the context, right? So what's going on? There's an act. This is what's going to be done. The scene is what's going on. There's the agent. This is the person or persons performing the act. This is the people involved, right? And then there's agency, and this refers to the means used by the agent to accomplish the act. What do I have at my disposal to accomplish this act? Do I have words? Do I have thoughts? Do I have messages? Do I have any types of like speech making? That would be considered a part of my agency. Nonverbals, right? There's the purpose. Why am I expressing this? Why? What's my goal here in my communication situation? And then there's the attitude, which was added in sort of later on, and it's the manner in which the agent positions himself, right? So what's my attitude towards this communication act? And remember, this is about communication, so it's not just about doing something. But the pentad is really versatile, and it can be really put in a lot of different situations. Not specifically thinking only about rhetoric, even though we could argue for a really long time, and if you ever want to come to my office, we can argue that everything is rhetoric, and that sounds so wonky, but language is so intertwined with our thought process and our thought system that Burke and others really genuinely believe that rhetoric was a part of every communication act that we have, and that includes visual and nonverbal. So a lot about Burke, and I know I rambled. I love Burke, but I'll tell you, I've read a lot of Burke, and he is a challenging theorist. People are still, like the smartest people who talk about and write about communication are still trying to break down what the heck Burke was talking about, but really fascinating. So I hope that was helpful. You can always email me if not.